what it's like to win the Super Bowl 3 times, why being humble and persistent leads to a legendary life, and how Brent Jones became a Super Bowl champion San Francisco 49er and a Silicon Valley venture capital legend. All right, all right, all right. Hey ho, let's go. Man, I can't believe this episode of Legends and Losers. If this one doesn't blow you away, I don't know what to do. Our guest today is none other than Brent Jones. And if you were going to make up or invent a guy, like you just wanted to invent like a superhero legendary guy, a man's man, but at the same time, a really open, caring, giving man, you would invent Brent Jones. And he doesn't sound real. I know he doesn't sound real. And he's that amazing. And I'm losing my shit to share this dialogue I had with Brent with you, because candidly, Brent blew my mind. I've been lucky enough to know him for a handful of years, and did a little bit of business with him. And what I know from my personal dealings with him, never mind his reputation, which we'll get to in his bio, is he's a man of honor. He's direct. He's fair. He does exactly what he says he's going to do. And he's an absolute pleasure to do business with. And he's got a great sense of humor. And in this dialogue, I've never heard or had a conversation quite like this. You have a champion athlete who's a mega big ding dong venture capitalist at the same time, and somehow he's as affable and approachable and open and as honorable, really, as someone could be. And we really strive to create an authentic dialogue. No bullshit, not in interview mode, but really just a couple of folks, couple of people having a in the parlance of our times, legitimate, authentic conversation about how to build a legendary business and legendary life, and hopefully have some fun and be silly along the way. And this conversation is that and everything else. So let me tell you about Brent. Brent Jones is a former National Football League tight end who, for all practical purposes, played his entire career with the San Francisco 49ers. From 1987 to 1997. Brent won 3 Super Bowl rings with the Niners and was a 3-time All-Pro and is a 4-time Pro Bowler. He finished his career with 11 NFL seasons, 417 receptions for 5,195 yards and 33 touchdowns. An incredibly cool thing about Brent, in addition to that, which is a hell of a list, Brent is also the recipient of the NFL's Brad Star Award, and we talk about this in our dialogue. This is an extraordinary acknowledgement given annually to the NFL player who best exemplifies outstanding character and leadership in the home, on the field, and in the community. That's who Brent Jones is. After his career ended, Brent became an analyst on the NFL Today TV show, and he also worked on NFL on CBS from 1998 to 2004. Brent decided to leave the television world in about 2005 to focus on his venture capital firm, Northgate Capital. He and his partner successfully built Northgate into a firm with approximately $5 billion under management. And at that point, Brent and his co-founder, fellow 49er, Tommy Vardell, sold Northgate. And then in 2016, Brent left the firm. And today, he's an advisor, an investor, and a husband and a dad. And here he is on Legends and Losers. So, Brent, tell me what it feels like to win the Super Bowl.
Chris, I got to tell you, the feeling's pretty amazing. You know, as a kid, you grow up watching the game on TV. You always see the hosts in the winning locker room, and everybody's jumping up and down and pouring champagne and crying and tears. And you think, God, what would that really feel like? And then to be there three different times, it was amazing. It's euphoric. You're so excited. You know, the season's long. There's so many down days, tough days, injuries, 108 degrees in Rockland, California, grinding through for potentially the promise of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so all those things usually culminate in just a lot of emotion, and just to have been there and felt it three different times is spectacular.
Yeah, and I mean, I can only imagine. Of course, I've seen it on TV. I haven't had world famous athletes pouring champagne over me because we just won. And what's it like, sort of, in those few moments as the game is winding down and it becomes clear that you're gonna win the Super Bowl?
I think it's the greatest feeling ever, just knowing that you're going to get it. My very first one didn't really have the benefit of that.
Right.
It was at the last few seconds, and so just being so dang close and not knowing that you're going to get it, it was certainly intense, and that's why that one was so darn special. It was the first one with John Taylor catching the ball with 25 seconds left in the game. That was the emotion there was great. Although, from a winner's perspective, I'd much rather have the game be over in the middle of the third quarter, like our Broncos and Chargers victories were, where I was fighting with the guy from the NFL to give him my Champions hat. And he said, we got to wait till the fourth quarter.
You mean you wanted your Champions hat a little early, huh?
I wanted the Champions hat right then.
And so maybe take me back to that first Super Bowl win that was, such a nail biter for everybody.
Well, so intense, and we felt like we were the better team, but the Bengals gave us a great battle. And so back and forth, and when they went ahead and we're down to 2 minutes and we've got 92 yards to go, you think, holy cow, we know Joe Montana is amazing, but so many different things could happen. All the momentum was with them, and we just took our little bits and pieces down the field and got ourselves in position to win it. The really interesting thing is the play that we won it on. We had practice all week. It was called 70 curl X up. It's supposed to be out of two tight ends.
Let me interrupt you. 70 curl X up?
Yes.
And that obviously means something, right? What does that mean?
Yes, 70 is the pass protection.
Yeah.
Curl is the route on the front side. The X is John Taylor, or in this situation, it's supposed to be the second tight end, and the up is a little nod out and back up, just to kind of spread the safeties a little bit. And we practiced that play probably 6 times during the week. It was only practiced out of one formation, 2 tight ends. I was that guy the whole week. And I had no idea we were calling it. I'm standing next to Bill Walsh. There's 25 seconds left. They call in 70 curl X up. They break the huddle, and he looks at me. We're supposed to have 2 tight ends. I wasn't calling the formation. And he's like, aren't you supposed to be in there? Fortunately,
so wait a minute. I just want to make sure I understand. They call for the play. You're on the sideline standing next to Coach Walsh. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So what
and you're supposed to be on the field, right?
Formation.
Yeah.
They call for the formation first. 2 tight ends, get in there. And so they don't, and they're calling the play in Bill's headset. So I know it. And then all of a sudden, they're breaking the huddle, and you hear somebody say, yes, 70 curl X up. And I look like, holy crap, I'm supposed to be in. And he sees me. I'm standing right next to him. I got to be right. Hey, aren't you supposed to be in there? Well, the greatest thing about our offense is we'd all know each other's positions, because there are times in the game where you don't have the right personnel in, or you'd swap. I'd have to play Jerry Rice's position, or John Taylor would have to play mine. Well, John was super sharp guy. So he just Joe brings him down in tight. So he lined up really tight. He almost was like a tight end, which should have been an alert to the Bengals defense. So we run the play. It works perfectly. Like I said, we ran it 6 times during the week.
Are you on the Are you on the field, or are you still standing next to?
I'm standing next to Bill Walsh.
So you don't make it on the field for the play.
I don't get to catch the winning touchdown that we practice all week that worked every single time.
That's awesome.
But I did not care as long as we scored and won. But like I said, that was my big play. I was so excited that we might get inside the 20-yard line and call that. And darn if we don't call it in the most crucial of crucial situations. And I'm standing there.
And, not to speak ill of the legendary Bill Walsh, but whose fault was it you were not on the field?
So it could be multiple people's fault. It could be Joe not signaling for the right personnel. Now, it's usually not the quarterback's fault. It's whoever's calling the plays, and that was Mike Holmgren upstairs. It could have been Denny Green, who didn't get in the right personnel. But the game's on the line, there's seconds left, and all hell's breaking loose.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might miss something.
Yeah. And so they're calling the play, and whoever called that play doesn't realize that you're not on the field. And so on one hand, what a bummer, but on the other hand, it's got to make you love your team even more because they improvised on the fly and, of course, won the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I mean, you can't afford timeouts. I'm not even sure our timeout situation. We might not have had timeouts at that point. So
yeah.
I can't recall. All I know is it was like we never skipped a beat. The route was perfect. JT knew what to do. Joe put it right there. No one even close, and it was game over.
How legendary is that? And then, boy, I bet that champagne tastes great, right?
Oh, man, I got to tell you, being in that locker room and here comes the trophy, and you're around, some of your best friends, and you it's not unlike, just with some of my experience in the startup world, it's not unlike the success of a company, getting to the point where it has the ability to go public. And certainly there's still runway after getting public, but just the fact that you battled through lean times, tough times, trying times together with a group of 50 people, and you came out the other end and you're sitting on top of the world. It's pretty emotional. It's an intense feeling.
And remind me, Brent, how old were you that first time?
I was, in 88, I would have been 25.
Wow. And so if you think about, this has got to be 25-year-olds in your life or people around that age, right?
Oh, yeah.
How old are you have two daughters?
I have two daughters, 28 and 27.
Yeah. So what the animal's like because you got them roaming around, right? And so
exactly. I just can't imagine being that age and, sitting on top of the world. At the time, you don't think about it like that, but you're still very young. And, there's some very mature athletes, as we've seen over the years, but there's also a majority that are still not quite mature enough at that point.
Yeah. And then maybe tell me a little bit about some of the celebrations and getting your ring and anything else about sort of the how your life changes in the few weeks and months right after the Super Bowl before you start thinking about the next season.
So right after the game, our owner, who's the best owner that there ever was, Eddie DeBartolo, there's a huge party for everybody associated with the team. And so monster party in Miami. It went to all hours, of the night. Of course, I think our flight left at 7 or 8 the next morning. So literally there's a lot of people that didn't get to sleep. I think I was probably in bed at, 4 or something like that. But you're just the emotion and the intensity and just the high that you're on is so remarkable. You're reliving it all, and you've got friends and family that you talk to that are there. And then just knowing that, wow, in 6 months or what have you, I'm going to have a gold ring with diamonds on it that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. That is just so unbelievable, so big, so gaudy, so it stands out. It's the best. And then you kind of, there's a surreal point where you're still a young guy. You're on a team, and you're part now of a legendary team, and you're born and raised in the Bay Area. And you start, every time you go somewhere, all of a sudden, people want to shake your hand. People want their picture with you. People are talking about the games. People are talking about the experience, and it's really cool to be able to share it with so many people.
And so you enjoyed that part, because you hear a lot of athletes who they don't like getting stopped in the street, or people want to take their picture. And of course, you won your Super Bowl in the pre-selfie era, but today, of course, there's a camera on everybody's hip pocket or whatever. Uh, but back at that time, you didn't mind being assaulted by your fans, so to speak.
Chris, not at all. It's the best. I was one of those fans growing up, and had a lot of idols, loved athletes, and you realize the ones that treated you well, how much you enjoyed them versus the ones that kind of blew you off. And I always said to myself, if I ever got in that position, I'd love being around the people and sharing it with them, because you're just one of them.
How great of you to say that. And I'm reminded, we had a dialogue with the legendary Octagon announcer for the UFC, Bruce Buffer, on Legends and Losers.
So great.
And he's so magnanimous. It's fantastic. Anyway, he said almost exactly the same thing, and he like you has that kind of reputation. And he said that something to the effect of, listen, I remember when, we couldn't get arrested. Nobody wanted to talk to the fighters, let alone me. Nobody was at the fights. Nothing was going on. And so he said, as long as people are respectful, he said, I don't like it when people chase me into the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so maybe take me back a little. Tell me about growing up and being an athlete, and especially tell me about your dad.
So it's Chris, it's what a blessing it is to have a dad that was a player, that was a coach. My dad was a local high school star, Lincoln High School, back in the day, and went to
And
San
I'll tell
Jose.
you, I mean, my wife grew up in San Jose, and when you and I first met, she was a cheerleader and so forth. And she said, "Oh, yeah, that's Coach Jones's son, right?"
So I
And
got that.
because I didn't grow up here, I didn't have a frame of reference. I'm like, this guy is a 3-time Super Bowl champion, and amongst many other things. And the first thing my wife says is, "Yeah, that's Coach Jones's son."
Well, just you can imagine, he's legendary. He was at a few schools here in the San Jose Bay Area, coached for 33 years, had played at San Jose State back in the day. He was drafted this is back, Chris, when you could be drafted. The AFL was still around. You could be drafted by more than one team. He got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers and this new team that was just starting out in the Bay Area called the Oakland Raiders.
How cool is that? And how interesting that, if I'm remembering your career properly, didn't you originally get drafted by the Steelers as well?
I was drafted by the Steelers, and that's a whole new path we can head down. But it was, growing up and having a dad that was always around, throwing the ball to you and playing sports, it was just the best. And you going to football games from the time I was born, and all those great years, and being the ball boy and growing up around the game was spectacular. And then to be able to kind of transition and have your own career and share it with your dad and your mom and your whole family was really special.
Incredible. I mean, beyond legendary. Now, I heard a rumor from a mutual friend of ours that your dad, once you got to high school, and he was your coach in high school, was he not?
Well, he was coaching me, but I really thought about going to school where he was coaching. He coached a majority of his life at Campbell High School and at Lee High
At
School.
Lee High School. I think that's where Carrie knew him from. Yeah.
Yes, and so it was such a potential. Your dad's always coaching you, no matter what. No, if he's your official
Whether
coach.
you like it or not, right?
Exactly. And so, Chris, this is funny. I was at Leland High School, and we had a great coach named Steve Cox, and I was more of a baseball player in high school. And
Didn't you go to college on a baseball scholarship,
I did.
Brent?
I went football, baseball to Santa Clara. I don't know how or why they gave me a football scholarship, because you're going to love this. I was
A football or a baseball? Let me be clear.
I can't believe they gave me football.
Oh, they gave you football. Okay.
Yeah,
I thought
they gave
you
me
went
both.
Okay.
But I sat on the bench in football. I was a second string wide receiver. my senior year. And I worked my butt off, and I thought I was better than the other guys. My friends thought I was, but I got the chance to play in like 3 games. And my dad used to tell me,
You played in 3 games in your final year in college?
in my final year in high school.
Oh, excuse me, in high school. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I'm
No, no,
messing you up.
no, no. I'm, listen. Every once in a while, the scotches catch up with me. Okay, so in high school, you played 3 games in your senior year.
Yes.
Wow.
And got a scholarship because I guess I had some potential. Terry Malley, who was the assistant coach at Santa Clara at the time, said, I think this kid can play. And it's funny because that was back in the day, and this goes back to my dad. Parents never complained. Kids never complained about playing time. And I remember coming home and talking to my dad and being frustrated. He said, you've got to work harder in practice. You have to make it so they have to put you in the game. And it was funny. My goal was to impress my high school football coach and work my tail off. And I learned so much from him, and he helped get me into Santa Clara and change the trajectory of my life. But at the time, I was like, how about a little love? Can I play in high school?
Incredible. And were you? You must have been playing more baseball than football.
Yeah, I was a baseball player. I thought I was going to go to USC.
Yeah.
And play baseball.
What position did you play, Brent?
I was a catcher.
Yeah, I mean, you're a big dude, right?
Hopefully, I'm not too big now, but yes.
I meant that as a compliment. Like,
I'll take it,
man.
I'll take it.
A lot of the best catchers, of course, have been these big, strong, like you, big chest and stuff. You got a big target to go at. You got a lot of body to block the ball with.
That's exactly right.
Oh, I love it. And I did hear from a mutual friend of ours, Jim, that your dad was pretty tough on you as a football player and as an athlete overall.
He really is, and tough is, with some caveats. You never complained in our family. You just worked harder. If you weren't getting it done, then you spend more time practicing. And there was never a day that we weren't playing ball of some sort. My dad had a lot of responsibilities, but he always said, hey, I'm always around if you want to throw the ball around or go down and have batting practice or run some pass routes. And, to have your dad as a quarterback, I mean, when I was 8 years old, I was winging the ball. I could throw the ball as far as Joe and Steve any day. And
wow.
Yeah, and so I was.
Wow, that's saying something. Because
they were afraid to go against me because they knew I could throw it farther than them.
And also, if I remember your career well enough, and I didn't live in the Bay Area or even the United States while you were playing, but you were considered pretty fast and agile for a guy your size, were you not?
I was, and sometimes it didn't look like I was running that fast. But I went to that big combine they have now that's televised on TV. Back then, nobody knew what it was. Nobody cared other than the guys that were going into the NFL. And I ran a 4.6 40, which at the time was super fast for tight ends. Now some of those big guys now are running faster than that, and it's been pretty remarkable. But at the time, I was moving around pretty good because I was a wide receiver that got converted to tight end.
Oh, wow. Interesting. And so if you, do you remember at the time if you kind of calibrate it, what a Jerry Rice would be running, like how quick you were compared to him?
So the funny thing is on paper, Jerry Rice ran the same time. So, and I know he was a little bit faster. He was a little bit faster than me, but
you teach that so Hall of Famer who's boss.
Exactly, and so it's amazing because Jerry Rice, when the ball was in the air, was probably running 4.2, and it's what we call functional speed or game speed. It's not versus a clock on a 40-yard track, but his college times didn't blow people away, but he played the game so much faster.
I love it. And while we're on Jerry, maybe we could spend a few moments. I mean, you tell me, but is there any debate in your mind that he's the greatest who ever played?
It's not even close. Certainly a position. The funny thing is, the two greatest to ever play, in my mind, were my teammates and my buddies, Jerry and Joe. And so you can go back and forth whether wide receivers, more important and more significant than a quarterback.
Do you
But
mean
I kind
greatest
of
player ever, not just greatest wide receiver?
greatest player, the two greatest players are those two guys.
Wow.
As a receiver, it's not even close, though. Jerry Rice, guys might put up statistics, but what he did functionally and what he did to change the game and to never have another guy like that, I don't think we'll ever see that day. And so he is remarkable. His work ethic, his intensity, his unselfishness, which you don't usually see. That's not built into wide receiver DNA.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the diva wide receivers, they sort of seem like, I don't know, like, yeah, diva rock stars. I'll never forget way back in the old days, Eddie Van Halen, when they were sort of constantly breaking up with David Lee Roth, the lead singer in Van Halen. He said, "Oh yeah, the problem with Roth is he's got LSD, lead singer's disease, right?" And some of those showboaty wide receivers can kind of feel that way, right? They sort of got the wide receiver disease, if you will.
That was that was my group growing up, so I knew all about the lead singer disease, and but that's what made him great, right? And
Yeah, I mean, there's some amount of that can be fun, particularly the guys that do it with a bit of a tongue in cheek, right? If they kind of know you're along for the ride and they're playing, it's sort of like I know you're a fight fan. The way Conor McGregor does it, like he's so over the top with his bravado that we're all in for the show, and we know it's a show, and he knows it's a show, and it makes it more fun, right? So if it's like that, it's great. It's the guys that
but
are sort of purely arrogant that are a little bit, at least as a fan, harder to
it,
love.
exactly. There's nothing wrong with guys behind the scenes that certainly have confidence, have attitude. It's the 100% arrogant me all the time, and I'd rather have 15 catches than have a win. Um, we never had any of those guys on our team, but they're out. They're certainly out there. Speaking of McGregor, I see that just even the crummy tickets are like $7,000.
Yeah,
I thought I was going to go. I said, if I can get close for 10 grand, I might do it. And it's 10 grand won't get me in the neighborhood.
yeah. Well, and am I mistaken, or am I remembering this right? Were you on the board of Strikeforce?
I, Chris, that is a great memory. Yes, I was on the board of the San Jose Sharks, Silicon Valley Sports and
Yep.
Entertainment,
Yep.
and it was a blast. And we took a flyer on Strikeforce, and I don't know that anybody else was really passionate, but I was, and so I was all over. So I was jumping on the free tickets. I was ringside for 4 or 5 big events, and it was great. And I believed in the long-term value of Strikeforce, and certainly the battle with UFC and all the things that were going on there. But we sold out, made some money, and it was right before the trajectory went nuts. And so it was a blast. And to go backstage and kind of hang with some of those fighters every now and then and just kind of see them, and it was really intriguing. It's something that I've never spent time in the boxing ring or
Did
in
you
MMA.
wrestle or do any jujitsu or boxing or any of that
No,
stuff?
in fact, I'm might be too old, but I've been thinking about maybe getting in the ring just for some good cardio and just to learn, some good techniques. But it's really compelling to me, and I don't know why. Some people don't like MMA at all, but just to watch the pure one-on-one aggression and strategy that goes into that. And I'm sure a lot of that comes from the football background and the tactician side of it. That
You mean you're a little aggressive, Brent? Is that what you're telling
well,
me?
not, yeah, not at this age, but it was a blast to watch, and I wanted us to keep Strikeforce forever. I thought we could merge, we could really gain some upside, but it was a little bit away from the core competency in our National Hockey League team, and so we ended up getting rid of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think Scott Coker, I mean, you would know better than me, but it appears he's doing a great job now as the head of Bellator MMA.
Yeah, I think he is doing a great job, and it's just to be able to keep it out there and keep it fresh. That's always the challenge. And you look at what had happened to boxing in the U.S. when I was growing up, even high school, college. I mean, boxing was everything, at least for young males.
Yeah.
It was so exciting, and just kind of there's so many leeches and hangers on, and the public eventually grew disinterested, and we didn't have great champions. I mean, I met Tyson 4 or 5 years ago, and that was kind of like the last guy. And certainly Holyfield was significant,
Yeah.
but boxing, I just feel bad because it's been replaced now by MMA. And when you talk about big fights, big people, big names, and in a real fan base, which is sad because I really loved boxing growing up.
Yeah, and I don't know if you could see behind me.
Come on, that is great. What a
Yeah.
shot.
Well, and it's interesting because Ali here is slipping the punch, right?
Of course he is.
And most people, when if they put up a boxing or any kind of a fight poster in their house or their office, as the case may be, they put up a picture of Ali punching somebody or standing, that famous photo of him standing over Sonny Liston and that kind of stuff, like a dominant one. I love this photo because what's clear to me, and maybe this is more important because I started my fight training later in life, and so I highly recommend it, by the way, is there's
Cool.
two parts of fighting: hitting and not getting hit.
That's right.
And the not getting hit is very important.
I can imagine it is. Well, the thing that blows me away, and I could see it out of the corner of my eye, kind of behind you, but I couldn't see Ali's legs. But
Yeah.
it looks, before you show that, it looks like a boxer getting hit and going down. And then you see that. Now that's athleticism and dexterity. And obviously he was so quick, not only with his hands, but to be able to slip punches. And you make a great point. People focus on the punching side, but not getting hit is pretty significant.
Well, and the other interesting thing, and I would never have known this before I started my boxing training, is you can't see his right arm in this shot.
Yeah.
But I know what's going on with his right arm as he pulls back and he's got all of his weight on his back foot. You could see he's got his ankle up, right?
Yep.
His right hand is here cocked. And so his cannon is ready to go.
Wow.
Joe's over here. He's also changed the angle. I don't know for sure what happens after this photo, of course, but if I had to bet, he puts pressure on the tip of his toes right here, puts all of his weight, all of his power from his legs, because your legs and hips is really where it comes from, right?
Yep.
Probably comes back with a crushing cross right here to the side of his head. So what my boxing coach has taught me, and we train this move every multiple times a week. You pull back and you're cocked, and your opponent is now forward, and bang, and that's a fight-ending move if you get it right.
That's really
so
cool.
Not only is he slipping the punch, he's actually setting Joe up to get smashed in that shot.
Well, he was a master at that, and Joe's certainly exposed. So I'm impressed with all your fight training. So have you been able to make that same move and land the blow?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We train it. So I assume it would be much like football, to your point on winning the Super Bowl and the plays that you practice over and over again, right? There's certain drills you just drill all the time, and one of them is somebody comes at you and you come back and you're ready to go. We drill that. I mean, I drilled it thousands of times. Yeah, and the best thing somebody can do in a fight, at least as far as I'm concerned, is throw the first punch.
Great call.
And if you think about Mayweather by way of example, right, he is arguably the best defensive fighter. That's why as a pure fan, I find his fights are boring.
Exactly.
Now, from a boxing technician point of view, they're fascinating, but I don't watch him like a fan. I watch him like to break him down. As a fan, I actually, and I mean no disrespect, but I kind of think he sucks. He's the opposite of McGregor in that way, right? The reason I think McGregor is so popular is because he's exciting as shit to watch fight.
There's something about paying your money, tuning in, and seeing some excitement, right?
Yeah.
And McGregor's done that. I mean, good for him. Good for the sport.
And now I would have thought maybe you might have had some connections. You could get, better options on the tickets or whatever.
Those Strike Force out the window, and all my connections went flying away.
I love it. So if you take me back a little bit more, Brent, so you grow up, you have this incredible dad, you grow up being this awesome athlete, but yet you're on this baseball track, and sort of what puts you more on the football track than the baseball track?
So, Chris, I was a freshman at Santa Clara, had a really good baseball season, redshirted in football. So now I've played football like 5 or 6 years, and I've never started. And I'm starting to think, man, football's hard, especially if you don't get to play. And I was excited about my sophomore year coming up, and it was the very first time that I got to start my second year at Santa Clara, and it was fun. So all the practice, all the hard work, you could go and enjoy the games and have it all pay off and catch touchdown passes and have a blast. And it was maybe one of the most fun seasons because it was new to me. I mean, getting into the games and being in the huddle all the time. And so
It's
that was
hard to imagine you riding the bench, Brent. I just got to tell you.
it was a bummer, especially when you think you should be playing, but you didn't
And I
call the
assume you were
coach, you
not
didn't
riding.
complain,
You weren't riding the bench in baseball, right?
So I was playing in baseball, and my second year in football, I dislocated my shoulder the last game of the season and had to have surgery. And the baseball coach at Santa Clara didn't think it was great that I was playing football, and didn't know if my throwing shoulder is going to have surgery, and so he said, you know what, we're gonna take your scholarship and give it to somebody else. That wasn't a full scholarship; it was a partial, but it was kind of the very first time where I realized, man, this is a tough deal. We're not in high school anymore, and
And what
so
are you, about 19 at the time, maybe?
yep, I was 19, and my initial
Was that
reaction
a
was, I'm
huge blow to you? I mean, I got to
huge
believe
blow,
it was.
because baseball was my passion at the time. So I was going to transfer. I was going to go back to junior college. We have some great junior college baseball programs in the Bay Area growing up. Dianza, San Jose City, West Valley. There's some really good JC baseball going on. And so I was going to transfer, and I was just distraught. Everything was closing in around me. And I went and met with our head football coach that was our athletic director at the time, a legend in the Bay Area by the name of Pat Malley. And he was so wise beyond his years. And he sat me down. He said, you know what? I don't like the fact that they're taking your scholarship away, but you've got to look at your long-term future, and getting a degree from Santa Clara is going to mean something the rest of your life. And we believe that you could be a special player. And so we're going to pick up your scholarship, and we'd like you to move from wide receiver, where it's nice that you're, a semi-fast, sort of slow wide receiver, and we think you could be a great tight end and maybe even someday make it to the NFL. And to this day,
And
I
what was
don't
the
know
name
if
of
he
the
was giving
coach?
me a line.
What was the coach what was his name?
His name was Pat Malley.
Pat Malley.
And I bought everything he said, hook, line, and sinker. I had so much respect for him. So at that point, I gave up my baseball career, and I became obsessed with trying to be a football player.
And focusing more on being a tight end than a wide receiver?
Exactly. So I had to get in the weight room. I had to do all these things that block, all these things that I hated to do that I didn't really want to do.
How much how much muscle did you have to put on, do you figure?
So at the time, I was probably, 200 pounds. And I probably, that first season at tight end, I probably got up to 210.
And how tall are you, Brent? Remind me.
About 6'4".
Yeah. So, I mean, 6'4", 200 pounds is really trim, actually, right?
It is. I wish I could get back there, Chris. I'd love that.
I won't ask you what you weigh now.
At least I'm trending the right way now. I've been focused on that for.
Well, you look great, Brent. I mean, you look awesome. I mean, if you sort of called Hollywood and said, "Hey, Central Casting, Super Bowl champion, please." I mean,
Yeah.
you're the man. I mean, you look like Brent Jones.
Well, that's nice of you to say. I always thought I had a face for podcasts, though.
Well, we're a TV show too, so
I know. That's why it's kind of a built-in slap behind the scenes. But no,
although
I
you were on
appreciate it.
CBS as a commentator for years after your playing career, were you not?
I was. That was a blast.
Maybe we'll get to that in a sec. But so it really, as I listen to you, I'm just struck by how much you reference coaches.
Yep.
So maybe share with me a little bit about what coaches have meant to you over the years. It sounds like Pat Molly was a big turning point for you.
So he really was, and it's funny because you have different things that you embrace. I mean, the ultimate coach is always my dad. From the time I was born to even now, he's going to work on my golf swing or something. But to respect coaches and not only see them as people helping you relative to your sport, but impacting your life lessons. And all along the way, whether it was my high school football coach, um, Terry Malley, who's Pat Malley's son, that got me to Santa Clara, and then Pat Malley, once I was there, that impacted me along the way. You think about guys that have had a major influence in your life, and then you get to the professional level, and Bill Walsh is your coach, and you're like, holy cow, this is unbelievable. Chris, I took notes my first year with the 49ers because I didn't know if I was going to make the team or not, but I figured Bill Walsh is so dang smart. I'm gonna write down all the things that he says strategically, from a directional perspective, from a way to approach life, all these different things. And you think about that, and
I
it's,
hate to interrupt you, Brent. Do you
oh
still
yeah,
have those notes?
you know what? Golly sakes, I've moved a few times. I came across them 7 or 8 years ago, and I had part of them, and I've got if they're in a box somewhere. I'd love to find them.
Well, look, listen, I'm nobody to tell you what to do, but I gotta believe if you could find those notes, there's so many cool ways you could share them. I mean, obviously, you could probably convert them into a book or use them for part of a book, uh, or hey, you could come on Legends and Losers and we could go through them together.
Well,
But
Chris,
I would love to know, the headset of a early 20s young guy first in the NFL with. I mean, it would just be fascinating to see that experience through your eyes at that time, right?
I'd love to go back and find him just to see. And it wasn't all, loves and hugs all the time.
Sure.
I loved his perspective. Bill was a tough coach, especially for a young new player trying to break in. And I'm sure there was times where I was frustrated, like I felt like I wasn't getting a fair look or whatever. But um, Bill ended up really liking me and was a significant part of the reason why I stayed there. Obviously, when the head coach likes you. But years later, after he got uh, out of the 49ers organization, was involved with Stanford, I'd go see him every few months, sit down with him, talk about life, talk about what he's got going on, his view, like how should I approach these things. And I was still playing, and I wanted to have his insight, his perspective on how to do things. And then after I was done playing, hey, I'm going to be in broadcasting, or I'm going to be an investor. I spent a lot of time talking to him about so many different aspects because he was truly a visionary.
And there's a lot of people who would, I mean, you tell me, but who would say that to this day he's one of the top 5, top 10 coaches ever in NFL history. Is that where do you have him?
Certainly I'm biased because I played for him, but it's tough to not put him in the top three. And Vince Lombardi gets a ton of credit, and he's become legendary and kind of historic in the way that sports writers wrote back then. They weren't looking for faults, or there wasn't social media to bring guys down. But he's certainly up there. Bill Belichick, I've been around him a handful of times, and he's so strategic and not always soft and cuddly, but behind the scenes, great sense of humor, super respectful of people that played the game, and just
He
a
always looks so
unique guy.
pissed off on TV, like somebody just did something terrible to his family, or somebody just hit him in the nuts, or like he just looks so grumpy. And that, I don't know, maybe it's the gray hoodie too. He just looks disheveled and angry.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun looking at him because I laugh because I've been able to sit down with him behind the scenes and laugh or talk about some specifics or this, that, or the other thing. And it just gives you a different view. But yeah, he's going to always be like that to the public.
And so if we go back to Walsh for a second, um, What were the big things, obviously, both as a player, and it sounds like he coached you and supported you throughout, your life afterwards. What are the big things, Brent, you think you learned or you take away as you look back on your time with Coach Walsh?
Bill was really structured. There was uh, a reason we did everything with the 49ers, and I could sit, Chris, and talk for hours about specifics, but I get a chance to speak to a lot of startup companies, and the attention to detail, I kind of go through 5 or 6 things that I learned through Bill and the 49ers organization, but the attention to detail was unlike any other. How many times that we would work on something, not only in the classroom, but go out and run through it on the field. And it would be, we're doing it again. And we'd be practicing, the offense would be practicing against air. And it'd be Joe and Jerry Rice and John Taylor and Roger Craig and Tom Rathman and myself. And all of our offensive line, guys that have been together at this point, some guys have been around for 2 years, some guys have been around for 7, 8 years. And the repetition, the one thing that he always wanted was very sophisticated smart ball players. It was you had to be up to speed in the classroom to be able to execute out on the field. But to go out for a practice and to run a play like we'd run 23Z in, which was one of our basic plays, we'd run it and he'd go, do it again. And we'd run it again, do it again. Brent, I need you at 6 yards over the ball. You're 5.5. Joe, you're taking one extra hitch that's like a 1/100th of a second that would throw off the timing. Things that aren't even probably that you could see, that the human eye couldn't even tell the difference. He could see it. Jerry, your depth is a half a yard too much on this. I don't like the timing. Do it again. Do it again. This is a play that we'd run in our sleep. We've done it a million times. It's like going back to square one. Okay.
And you would consider it a basic play as well?
Super basic. And then the thing that would be wild was then we'd run it, we'd rerun it a million games, practices. We'd come back the next year and we'd start at square one with Bill. Okay, 23Z in. Okay, we're going to run it this way. This is how we do it. And the old guys are going to teach the young guys. And we're not leaving the field. We're not moving on to the next play until it's run perfectly, exactly how I want it. And that attention to detail became so precise in just where he would have Joe deliver the ball to a receiver in stride, and how that would affect where he wanted it. Like if you hit a guy right in the numbers, Bill would be furious at Joe. Like, Joe, you've got to lead him, because just hitting what looks like to the average fan a perfect throw might cause the receiver to take a half step. And that half step is the difference between a cornerback tackling you, or if it's another 6 inches out in front of you, you staying in full stride, catching the ball and going 80 yards, which we saw John Taylor and Jerry Rice do so many times. We practice that precision day in and day out. There's no quarterback that has ever had somebody like Bill Walsh focused on you 24/7 like Joe did. And I know Joe had just the perfect mindset, and he was just so remarkable. And things that I would say no quarterback could do, Bill would say, Joe, you've got to do this. And I remember thinking to myself, man, if I'm Joe, I'm telling Bill to jump in the lake. But Joe never did that. And it was just that intent focus on perfection that we operated under. And those things in life can carry over so significantly, because sometimes we just fly by the details, or you don't want to dig in and get granular and sweat it out on specific things, whether it's in a company, whether it's in sports, whether it's in your workouts. And Bill's focus on that was legendary. And then look at the guys that produced. Look at Roger Craig and his work ethic, and look at Jerry Rice, and look at, here comes Steve Young.
Right.
Joe's, and it's just remarkable to have that impact on you to be in your 20s and to have that impact you. Every single one of those guys, and I talked about all offensive guys, but I got to tell you, a Keena Turner, a Ronnie Lott, some of our linemen, Guy McIntyre. Uh, it's remarkable how those lessons that those guys have learned way back when have translated into post-career success in all their different areas.
Is Ronnie Lott as awesome as I think he probably is in
Ronnie
person?
Lott is awesome. Ronnie Lott's the most giving guy that I've ever been around. He's involved in more charities, giving back to kids, giving back to people in the Bay Area. And I always kind of pride myself as being, one of those guys. He blows me away, blows everybody away. But Ronnie Lott's an intense guy. Ronnie Lott's still a competitor. So he's not always he's 80% cuddly, but the 20% don't get him fired up now. Even at this age.
I just love the way his attitude seems to come across, and he's got that smile, that megawatt smile that looks like it could power the planet, right?
Ronnie, he's such a unique guy, and such an intense guy. And he's probably the only guy that I know that still has the same level of intensity all these years later as he did when he played. Ronnie Lott was the most intense guy. I mean, as a teammate, I loved him. I respected him, but I was a little afraid of him. There weren't a lot of guys that I was ever afraid of. To this day, if you got Ronnie fired up, I'd take a step back.
Give Ronnie some room, huh? You don't want to be
exactly.
striking distance.
Exactly.
I love it. Now, I remember years ago when I was still at Mercury, Brent, we, before Coach Walsh passed, we brought him in to speak at kind of a leadership offsite kind of a thing. And I remember him speaking about management, not just coaching, and in particular, how he dealt with Montana, Steve Young, a situation that he had. And before I share what he said, but I'd be very curious how that looked to you as a player at the time, dealing with these two quarterbacks and how the coach was handling it.
So it's interesting because to look back at the time, Bill, as great as he coached as he was, and as strong as a relationship that he had with his players after he left the game, you always respected him, but he wasn't close to players while we were playing. You feared him. You didn't always believe that things were settled. His goal as a coach was to make you compete at the highest levels. And so one of the hallmarks of his philosophy was to have players pushing the starters. And so there was always a backup that he'd bring in top flight backups and they'd be pressing you. And he had every position that there was a starter was uncomfortable. You never knew where.
Did it make you feel, Brent, like you had to earn your
Yes.
position every game? Is that what he was aiming for?
Chris, not only every game, every day. And it's an uncomfortable feeling. Like, you're not the starter. Yeah, I'm good. I got a contract. I can kind of cruise. He wanted you uncomfortable in your approach to getting ready to play the game. And the only guy, and you could argue maybe Jerry Rice never had anybody seriously pressing him. The only guy that he couldn't find someone to press was Joe. And as Joe was getting older, I believe that the whole thing was, we need to bring in a quarterback, a big name guy that can press Joe. And I know Bill's belief was that you performed better with a little fire lit under you. So I don't think Joe thought it was such a great idea. I think his work on the field spoke for itself. But all of a sudden, you've got these two, big name quarterbacks, and Bill did nothing to quash the controversy. In fact, I think there were times where he fed it. Absolutely. And I think he felt that iron sharpened iron, and that competition was going to bring each guy to new heights of performance. And so it didn't feel comfortable. It wasn't, touchy-feely in the locker room.
In the everybody gets a cookie kind of fun way, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, after Steve came in, Joe had some of his best years ever. And
The thing that I remember him saying, and if this is wrong or I'm, misremembering it because it was years ago and several hundred scotches ago, but that Coach Welch almost said that he kind of lied to both of them about who was going to do what when, right? I seem to remember him sort of telling Steve, like, next week, right? Like there was this, he sort of had to, and I seem to remember him even using the word lie. Like I kind of had to lie. It was very clear, at least my interpretation was that he was saying that I had to play these guys off each other and I had to say things to kind of keep their head where I wanted them to, because otherwise I was going to lose one of them. One of them was going to say, hey, screw this, I'm going to go be a free agent or whatever, right? So he seemed to be a little bit nefarious was what I remember. Does that sound right to you?
it absolutely sounds right. In fact, I know that Steve felt like he was being given the job, that they were going to trade Joe or let him move along. Unbelievably, at the time, free agency was still a few years away. So when you were on a team, you were kind of stuck. You could be
Of
unhappy.
course, I forget that.
You
Yeah.
could hold out. So that almost made it worse. So there was no way to pacify both of them at the same time. So Bill, I'm sure, told white lies all the time to each of those guys. And then all of a sudden it's different. And one guy thinks one thing and one guy thinks the other. The great thing about that, though, is for all that conjecture and all that stuff, you still go out on the field and you prove it every day. And I think it made both guys better players.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be interesting. Are you still in touch with both guys?
Oh, yeah.
And do you reflect on the coach at all?
Everybody talks about Bill now and then. I don't think that we harken back to the controversy days. And I mean, let's face it, it worked out well for both of them. They're both in the Hall of Fame. They both have tons of Super Bowl rings, and they
Hard to
both
be
have
mad
done.
now, right?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
like, hey, maybe the old man had something.
Yeah, I don't know that either one of them would ever truly admit that, but it's from the outsider's perspective. Um, they both have done great.
And I got to ask you, what's it like to? I mean, you have 3 Super Bowl rings, yes?
Yes.
Now, my impression is if I had 3 Super Bowl rings, I would never take those freaking things off. I'd be walking around with them going, yeah, yeah, you're like nonstop, right? That sort of kid in me thinks that. So I gotta ask you. And I remember when you and I first met, you shared a little bit of this with me, but I'd like you to open it up if you could. What's it like to wear a Super Bowl ring in the world?
So, Chris, first of all, my initial thought when I was young was exactly what you said. I'm never taking this one off, and when I get more, I'm never taking any of them off. And then you wear them for 3 or 4 weeks, and every time you go out, it kind of says, "Look at me," and I'm the man. And they're great. They're spectacular to wear. It's a symbol of something that was a lot of hard work and a kind of a band of brothers and coaches and organization that did something spectacular. And I love wearing them now and then, but wearing them every day. I know there's a few guys that do wear them every day, but those are the guys who show up at a bar and want somebody to buy them a drink. And I'm not that guy. And so I'm a little bit more careful with where I wear them. I love wearing them. You feel it's not outwardly, yeah, look at me. It's more like, you know what, this symbolizes something tremendously special that so few people have. And the other side of that is there's so few people in the world that have seen one. They're so much fun to share with other people and let them hold it, try it on, and do that. It's kind of cool just to see them out in public.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a fan, I've had the opportunity to see and hold and try on Super Bowl rings, and it's like one of the greatest things I think you could do as a fan. So yeah, that's awesome. I also, you're a guy who has overcome some very serious losses, and so we talked about your high school and college experience and being drafted fifth, but right after you were drafted, or shortly after you were drafted, you were in a pretty horrible car accident, were you not?
I was, and it's funny, Chris, because you look back and you say, man, that was horrible. And that
And did
it
you get
might have
hit
been
by
the
a drunk
best.
driver? Did I read that right?
Drunk driver, right, probably 4 houses away from my house in San Jose, kind of a come around a bend. And um, my wife and I, she was my fiance at the time. We're driving, and we just kind of came around the corner, and this big truck came right at us and hit us head on. And it was, it was scary as heck. You can imagine. She broke her jaw, dislocated her shoulder. We both had seatbelts on, and the net of it was I had a herniated disc in my neck, which, this was 3 weeks after I got drafted
Oh,
by the
that's
Steelers, and so it was a slow process. They still signed me to my contract, put me on injured reserve. They weren't happy, but they were kind of, hey, that's okay. You're still our tight end of the future. And a month into the season, they had thought that it was going to take 6 months for the herniation to calm down. I wasn't going to need surgery. They didn't think. They decided to save money. I was making $70,000, and they thought I was overpaid on injured reserve. So they released my rights, and said, neck problem. We're going to just move on. And
and you're roughly how old, Brent?
I was 23, and I was just
And
blown
you,
away.
so I can't even imagine. You've worked your whole life to be a professional athlete, 2 sports, the whole thing. You get to the promised land, right? I got to believe that day you get drafted and it becomes a reality that you are more than likely going to play in the NFL. It's got to be the greatest day of your life at that point, right?
It was unbelievable, especially where it all started.
Yeah, of course. And then just play a few months forward, and not only have you and your gal suffered a horrible accident at the hands of somebody doing something truly criminal and wrong, but now your dream of playing in the NFL is vaporizing.
Chris, that's a perfect example. And I was crushed. And you kind of feel like you're blacklisted. You got a neck injury, you got a herniated disc. The
Yeah, we,
team that
we love football players with neck injuries, right?
yeah, that's that's a bad thing to have if you're strapping on the helmet and smacking into guys.
So, you know what? As we like to say, there's no such thing as a legend who isn't a loser. And so you have been either in a circumstance not of your own making, or, by being, on the bench or whatever it is, you've been sort of, you're not the up and to the right guy, right? You're not, the trajectory of your life is not a graph that is straight up
It
and to
is
the
not
right,
straight.
very far from it. And so, what is it about you, Brent, that in those moments where, you're being benched or you've been injured and now you're being thrown out of the NFL, what is it about you that allows you to stand up in those moments and continue forward with the extraordinary outcomes that you then go and produce?
Yeah, Chris, I actually think that, just growing up with a coach, everything is just you know, you tough it through, you battle through. Some of those things are so tough emotionally. I think my faith was always there in the times of the toughest travails, and you just know that if you keep working hard, something good is gonna end up happening for you. And at that time, when I came back after the car accident and was released, um, I really didn't know if I was going to get a chance to play football again. I was going to work at it. And the 49ers, a few months later, called, said, we're going to sign you. This is back when you went to training camp with 130 guys. And I looked at the depth chart, and I was the eighth tight end listed on the depth chart. And usually you don't recover from being listed eighth. And I remember just saying, I'm giving it my all. I'm going nuts. I went through about 5 or 6 months where I don't think I dropped a pass. I did everything. I just fought and scratched to even get Bill Walsh and some of the coaches to even know my name, to be honest, and ended up making the team by the skin of my teeth. It was just barely. And from that point on, I never looked back.
Unbelievable. I'm such a huge fan, and you're such an incredible inspiration. And that's it. The end of part 1. Now, please turn the tape over, press play, and strap yourself in for part 2.